It's a weird thing to grapple with the reality that thousands and thousands of people out there really hate you. But in this video, that's exactly what I'm going to attempt to do. My main channel, Phoenix Resale, has the dubious honor of being one of the most hated channels in either the reselling or video game collecting niches. I know this not by looking at my own comment section, but by how other top creators in the space will consistently ask me why I specifically get so much hate, and also whether or not I'm doing okay. So in this video, I want to walk you guys through how psychologically I have coped with hate in various stages of my channel's growth. I want to talk about why my channel specifically gets so much hate, and also why I believe there are above average rates of hate in the gaming niche specifically. I want to give a few pieces of advice to other creators out there who are looking to grow for the best methods that I have found to handle hate. And I also am going to share with you guys for the first time how at 440,000 subscribers this year, I'm actually dramatically shifting my strategy and philosophy towards hate, and how I'm honestly kind of sad about it. I want to start off by telling you guys about the psychological journey of this young dude starting a YouTube channel and the different stages of responding to hate that he went through as the channel grew. Starting out with a brand spanking new channel. This was February of 2020. I had learned to flip video games and to support myself and my wife by watching YouTube videos, and I figured I would just go ahead and give it a shot. Started uploading, and you know, originally it was getting maybe 10 views on a video, right? And then slowly it was 30 and 40 and 50. And in this whole range between 0 to 1,000 subscribers, on the average video, I was probably only getting a few comments. And I remember when I got my first hate comment, somebody saying something stupid about how I looked, or actually, I think it was a scalping comment that, you know, I'm scalping all these used items that I'm finding at pawn shops. And I remember the feeling of getting that comment felt like I had made it. It felt like a rite of passage, like I'm really a YouTuber now. This is actually happening. And so the first stage of responding to hate that I went through was actually celebrate the hate. That was my initial paradigm for, I would say, all the way up through around 1,000 subscribers. And as I kept posting videos of going to pawn shops and garage sales at that time, or video game stores, at that point we were getting into, you know what, early to mid 2020, I started to recognize a lot of trends, kind of annoying trends in the hate comments that I was starting to get as the channel was growing. I saw a lot of people calling what I was doing scalping, even though it's flipping used stuff and that's not possible. And I saw a lot of economically confused people thinking that resellers are capable of setting market prices and responsible for inflating market prices. And that was kind of bothersome. And I started thinking, man, there are so many trends of ignorance. I think maybe if I just like stepped in and let people know what's what, you know, explain basic economics to people, or say that, no, you're confusing your terms. I'm not a scalper. I'm not like buying PS5s at Walmart here. You know, maybe that would make things better. So my second stage psychologically that I went through was actually debate the hate, which, you know, a little bit naive, I'll admit. I was brand spanking new on this platform. I didn't know what I was doing. The stage did not last all that long, because it doesn't take very long to realize that this does not go anywhere. The kinds of people who leave mean comments on YouTube videos don't respond to reasoning. So it only took me from around 1 to maybe 10, this might honestly be a little bit late, but it's a nice round number, to realize that this strategy is not all that great. But the third phase, you can see, from 10,000 subscribers all the way up to very recently, literally this year, 440,000 subscribers, my mindset shifted. And it shifted, I think, in a really positive way, from this sort of angry, defensive version, right, of debating the hate, to actually a much more friendly and joking embrace the hate. You'll notice these are all really nice and rhymey for you guys. Embrace the hate. So what I would do is I went from, getting angry and defensive and, trying to prove people wrong to like taking screenshots of really dumb comments and responding to them and then posting them to like my Instagram story I used to do a while back. Or I would create bits on the main channel, a character, Hater Hank, where I would impersonate some of the dumbest comments that I knew I would get anytime I stepped out of line with, the toxic gamer crowd. I would put my glasses on upside down and do a stupid voice. This Phoenix resale, he doesn't know anything because he's just selling games for profit. And then the glasses fall off and that was the whole bit. Those are two different manifestations of my general philosophy of, okay, I'm not, as the channel is growing, the amount of hate I'm going to get is not going to go down. So I may as well have fun with it. And I think for a lot of people, this may be a very freeing strategy. I unfortunately am having to, at this stage in my career, change tack again. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Unfortunately, it's going to break this nice rhyming scheme. Spoiler alert. But the one thing in this entire growth stage that stayed incredibly consistent for me was the advice that I was getting from other people. There was really only one piece of advice that I pretty much ever got, and it was never from people who had actually grown on social media. You guys, some of you have probably typed it in the comments already. The advice is just ignore it. And I have to admit, on the surface, this advice sounds very sound, right? You don't want to feed the frenzy, right? You don't want to poke the bear that is clearly already very angry. So the best response is probably to just ignore it, right? As long as you just stop reading all these comments, psychologically, you'll probably be a lot healthier, right, Caleb? And so I actually would go through many phases of trying to adhere to this advice. I would say, all right, you know what? I'm going to stop reading comments, and that's going to be really nice because, then I'll be exposed to a lot less hate. And then, a couple days would go by and I would get a couple of DMs from followers saying, hey, I saw that this dude made this really nasty video about you and just wanted to say, stay strong, just ignore it, and we're pulling for you. And I'd be like, okay, thank you, appreciate the support. It probably would have been a little easier to ignore it if you hadn't messaged me at all, but thank you. And then a couple days later, I would be, scrolling on my personal YouTube feed looking for something to watch and see my face in a thumbnail that I didn't create, except my face has devil horns and, little money icons in the eyes, and it's talking about how I, screw over all the people who are both who I'm buying from and who I'm selling to somehow at the same time. And I'd be like, thanks a lot, algorithm. It probably would have been a lot easier to follow this advice if I'm apparently also going to have to cut off my favorite form of media consumption, which is watching YouTube, if I'm going to completely sever that kind of stimulation from my brain. And then the next day I would be doing some SEO stuff, on Google and stumble upon a Reddit forum about Phoenix resale and discover that it's entirely dedicated to dozens of people just trashing me and talking about how I'm everything wrong with the hobby and talking about how, I'm driving up prices, I'm everything wrong with the hobby, I'm ruining, everything that they love about collecting video games. And I'd be like, okay, I'm doing my best to just ignore it here, but it seems like it's getting a little bit harder to escape, especially as the channel's growing. And then the next week I would be like at small group at church, and we'd, somehow start talking about my goofy YouTube channel, and someone would Google Phoenix resale and stumble upon that same Reddit thread and get a little bit confused. And, we all, of course, laugh it off about how many haters there are out there, but the thread is so overwhelmingly negative that, I can kind of tell that person doesn't really quite look at me the same afterwards. And I realized the more I tried to dig into and follow this advice of just ignore it, the more the channel was growing, the more absurd it started to become. Because in the vast majority of cases, the people who are giving this advice have never gotten those texts. They've never had that awkward relational dynamic when someone really doesn't know what to make of you. So for those reasons, all throughout my whole YouTube career, I've really struggled to truly implement that advice of just ignore it. Now, folks, I want to address one of the most common misconceptions that I see in the world of YouTube hate advice, and it's one that I believed for a very long time. I used to think that the amount of hate that a given channel would receive in any given niche would pretty much be proportionate to their channel size. So this graph of overall hate to channel size would look pretty much like this. Because if you assume that the percentage of hate throughout a channel's lifetime, regardless of how much it grows, like say a given channel is getting 100 views per video, if they've got a 1% hate ratio, then they would have one hater. But if the channel 10x's in size and they're getting 1,000 views per video, suddenly, right, they go from here to here on our fancy little graph here, they might go from having one hater to 10 haters. And oh dang, I've got more haters now. This is so unfortunate. But folks, the reality is way worse. I thought that this graph would be more or less linear. In reality, it's much more like this. Why is that the case? It's the case because you can't assume that the hate ratio is going to stay the same regardless of channel size. What I've found is that actually this percentage of hate to positivity tends to grow as the channel grows, which causes this line to skyrocket. It's not just the number of haters that gets bigger as your channel is growing, it's also the percentage. Now, that begs, of course, a massive question, which is why? Why does that happen? Let me close this so there's less glare. And I actually realize on my list here I forgot one. The first and most obvious reason is just breadth. What do I mean by that? As your channel is growing over time, it's going to get pushed to a wider and wider audience, and as that happens, there will be more and more people who are less inclined to agree with you. So even though this, when it's explained that way, makes a lot of sense, it's something that I didn't account for when I was growing my channel initially, and I got really discouraged as I was going from 100 to 1,000 to 10,000 to eventually 100,000 average views per video, as my percentage of hate seemed to be getting a lot worse over time. Like the hate comments used to be pretty few and far between, but now, boy, it feels like they're getting a lot more common. But only part of this increase, I believe, is just because of breadth. I think the single most important reason, at least on my channel and within my niche, is something that I learned from Alex Hormozy. He says, everyone wants you to be successful, just not more successful than they are. And if that's true, and I believe anecdotally from my own experience that it is true for most people, then you would definitely expect that as your channel size grows and as the perception of your success as a YouTuber goes up, more and more people would feel insecure and jealous of that success, and therefore your ratio of positivity to hate over time, the more people feel like you're more successful than they are, the more people are likely to start to fall into this hate category. A few other subsidiary reasons that I've found over time is, one, the more you grow, the more you lose underdog status, right? If you ask someone their favorite store, no one's gonna say Walmart, right? Even though they very well may do most of their shopping there because it's not interesting, right? They're the opposite of the underdog. They're the incumbent, they're the favorite, and that's boring. So because of that, the more your channel grows, even though you may feel like you're the exact same person, the more you start to lose this underdog status, and frankly, it becomes less fun for peripheral people to root for you. This is one thing, the community aspect. Nobody warned me when I was getting my bachelor's in YouTube art in college. Not actually a real degree, by the way. Maybe it is somewhere. I don't know, not at my school. I majored in international studies, so look how much I'm using that. Nobody warned me when I was starting my YouTube channel that there would be communities of people that hate me that would start to find each other the more it grows. Not just in the comments section, but also in Reddit. And even on Discord, I've seen this happening as well. It's a really unfortunate reality, but it can create kind of this hateful echo chamber that also brings in new people that weren't even exposed to you in the first place. Then the last thing I've unfortunately seen is that the more your channel grows, the higher incentive there is for other people to publicly take the dissenting opinion. The form that I've seen this specifically is in the form of other YouTube channels popping up that increasingly like to just talk about how much I suck. Whether it's, my hairline, or I love Chipotle too much, or we could dedicate an entire video to the reason that I'm the death of the video game hobby, and I'm price fixing and inflating and have no passion for games and gaming and all that stuff. But the reality is, the more people that know about me and the worse my ratio is growing, the more hunger there's going to be in the YouTube viewer community for content that is about how much other people also hate me. That's going to start to be satisfying to watch, and other channels can grow based solely on appealing to this audience the bigger my audience becomes. And for me, what this has unfortunately amounted to in my case is that over time, even though I probably started with a ratio of about 1% hate to positivity, at this point, it's probably around 50-50. That, if I'm scrolling my YouTube comments and just trying to, get a pulse on the community and see how people are liking videos, depending on the video, it's around a 50-50 ratio. And don't even get me started on the absolute cesspool that is YouTube Shorts, because it is way worse over there. Now, I know I promised to give you guys some YouTube hate advice from your friendly neighborhood, widely hated YouTuber, but before I do, I just wanted to say that another thing I felt like nobody really prepared me for was just like how bad it feels to watch this ratio go up over time. And even if you're trying really hard to ignore the hate, it's very normal to periodically question, wait a second, like, have I changed for the worse? To me, I feel like the only thing that's changed about me is that I have now achieved a lot of the things that I set out to do 4 years ago. Other than that, I feel like I'm the same receding hairline, Chipotle-loving, Prius-driving dude, but nonetheless, I'll still sometimes see people who I recognize from the comment section of, in the early days of the channel, who now have flipped over into this camp and are talking to me about all the things that they now hate about me. I guess I just say all that to say that if you are also in this boat of slowly watching your hate ratio go up, just know you are not alone. I'm right there with you, and I guess now's a good time to jump into the advice portion to figure out how to deal with this unfortunate reality. Now, folks, you may be able to tell that I've spent a good amount of time thinking about this subject, and I've broken up my thoughts into two categories: general advice and more specific tactics. The first piece of general advice that I have is to keep in mind as you're trying to grow that hate scales faster than praise. I'm really big on these sort of short, concise, axiomatic mottos that you can pull out and just keep in your head. Like when you're reading the comment section of a video and just thinking to yourself, man, this feels worse than it used to. Just remember this: hate scales faster than praise. I want to be clear on this because one thing that I'll sometimes hear from people is, hey, if you're getting a lot of hate, that means you're doing something right. Because they're trying to get at this idea, but they're not quite saying it right. I actually disagree if you were to say that if you're getting a lot of hate, you know you're doing something right, because sometimes if you're getting a lot of hate, it's because you've really messed up, right? And you've compromised your original values, or your community is trying to point you in another direction. So getting hate itself is not an indicator that you're doing something right, but when you are growing, it's a natural consequence. So you shouldn't necessarily beat yourself up for it. The next piece of more general advice is I'm running out of space. Ignoring comments doesn't make you a bad person. This is something that I've had to come to terms with very gradually, because it's always been a really high value for me over the course of my channel that I'm in touch with the community that I'm building on YouTube. I want to know how my viewers are feeling and responding, and the kinds of bits that they think are funny, and the kinds of inside jokes that they're responding to, and the content that they find most valuable, and the things that are inspiring or educational to them. And I also had this idea in my head that I didn't want to become one of those YouTubers that gets big and changes for the worse and loses touch. And so I've always really fought for trying to be as involved in my comment section as I can, but I've just had to come to grips with the reality that hate scales faster than praise. And because of that, as everyone knows, we're psychologically wired to detect threats. So because of that, it takes, what is it? I think it's 7. That was the awkwardest 7 I've ever drawn. 7 positive comments to overcome the negative impact of one negative one. And guess what? When your ratio over time gets significantly less favorable than this, it's usually going to be a net negative to spend a lot of time reading comments, is what I've had to realize. And that doesn't make me a bad person. It doesn't mean that I'm changing for the worst or ignoring my community. It just means that, actually, we'll take a little bit of a foray into the tactics over here. It just means that I'm being more selective about who I get feedback from. I'm really fortunate in my life to have a really great support system of, first of all, a wife who really loves me and tells me when I'm screwing up and becoming really self-absorbed. That's the most common thing that I'm having to, because guess what? I'm a narcissistic YouTuber and I think about myself a lot, that she has to remind me of often. I also have friends who will call me out if I'm becoming a D-bag. And I've also got all kinds of viewers that I meet at convention, real life people, who will come up to me and say, hey, I love the Mission Switch videos, or I love it when you do bulk deals, or I'm a big fan of Renix P-Sale when you rant about things that you happen to be thinking about, business topics for a long time. If that's you, then thank you for coming. So because of those in-person connections that I've gone out of my way to establish, ignoring comments doesn't mean that I'm sticking my head in the ground. It means that I'm getting wiser about whose input I let into my brain. The last piece of general advice that I have, just for my psychological state when I'm reading hate comments or like mean DMs or whatever, is I try to take a step back, take a breath, and lead with empathy. This is such a healthier thing to do if you are responding at all, or even just in the way that you're thinking about the people who are saying mean things about you. Leading with empathy rather than defensiveness or spite, right? Or even sort of like the mean-spirited joking that I was doing earlier on in my embrace the hate phase. Leading with empathy is just such a more mature and wholesome adult thing to do, to realize that, like, if someone's commenting something mean on the internet, it's because of, in some form, they want to feel better, right? I don't know a single well-adjusted adult who's generally doing well and likes themselves that leaves mean comments. I don't. So I'll just try to ask myself, like, what is the pain that this person is probably feeling? Like, how bad of a place do they have to be in to leave comments like this or send a DM like this? And if I respond at all, I try to lead with that. Most often I don't, because, like I said earlier, it's a losing game. But even in just how you think about those people, how you talk about them, how you engage mentally with that reality, I really do my best to lead with empathy, and it just makes me feel better. The other 2 tactics that I have, like on the very practical side, are 1, be liberal with the hide user button. Almost any YouTuber will be very familiar with this. This is a very satisfying feature by which you can see a negative comment, click hide user, and then for the rest of that user's lifetime, they will still be able to comment on your videos, but not realize that they are literally the only one who can see it. I've also seen some negativity, like some of these toxic types that do a lot of negative commenting will try to call people out for deleting comments. I'm just here to tell you, I am very pro hiding users. I don't do a lot of deleting comments, because if you say something that's mean enough to me once that it kind of gets to me, I'll just hide you forever. I'm so in favor of that. There seems to be this sentiment among toxic people that they have a right to express their negative views on your platform. They don't. Just hide them and don't feel bad about it. Then the last one is delete YouTube Studio. This, for anyone who doesn't know, is basically the YouTubers like back-end analytics app where it's super easy to just like scroll comments by video or in general. And I would find myself very often just doom scrolling comments because, again, I'm a narcissist and I like reading what people say about me. But when it's a 50% positivity ratio, that ends up being really psychologically destructive. So I will confess to you guys that I'm a little bit of a YouTube Studio-aholic. But I'm very proud to announce that I am 5 weeks clean. I have not had the app for over a month now and can say with certainty that it was absolutely the right decision. I'm very bullish on deleting YouTube Studio. And the last thing that I wanted to say before we get into how my specific strategy is significantly changing this year, that's kind of both advice and a tactic, is, man, go easy on yourself. Like, if you're a creator, nobody prepares us for this stuff. And the reality is, like, this isn't something that you can really talk about publicly all that much if you do have a growing YouTube channel, because it's always in some form going to sound like champagne problems, right? Like first world problems, like, oh, boo-hoo, you're having a hard time with a growing, growing an audience and making more money as you're getting to make videos for a career, and oh, people are cyberbullying me, boo-hoo. But the thing is, like, yeah, they kind of are champagne problems, but that doesn't make them any less real. And if you're someone who's just watching this for entertainment and you're not actually trying to grow on YouTube or Instagram or TikTok or wherever, the takeaway here would be actually go easy on your favorite creators. Like, if their viewer engagement behavior changes as they are growing on the platform, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're trying to be more out of touch. They may just, like we were talking about earlier, they may just be trying to feel okay. So what is this big change in strategy, change in philosophy that I've been hinting at this whole time? Well, folks, it is that I am changing from embrace the hate, which has been the mentality that I've had for the last better part of 4 years, to now coming all the way back around to the advice that I resented for so long of ignore the hate. Now, what does that actually mean specifically? It means that now, not only on the main channel, but also on this channel, I am going to stop reading the comments. I've been thinking about making that change for a long time, but the real nail in the coffin was actually, I was reading my Bible the other day and read this verse in Proverbs 9. It says, "Whoever corrects a mocker invites insults. Whoever rebukes the wicked incurs abuse." And it hit me like a ton of bricks, because regardless of what you believe about the Bible, I think we can all agree that that bit of ancient wisdom is pretty self-evidently true, right? For the last 4 years, I've spent so much time correcting mockers, in my own jokey way. And guess what? I've incurred plenty of abuse, I would say. Now, folks, I told you, it makes me sad to make that change. Honestly, a little bit emotional, because for the longest time, I stopped reading a lot of comments on the main channel a while ago because the ratio was so bad. For the longest time, I did read almost every comment on this channel, Renix P Sale, because it's much smaller, much less edited. It's pretty much, who I see as the core of my following. But unfortunately, I've had to come to grips with the reality that that ratio also has taken a significant hit ever since I started making videos about making a video game reseller app, which a lot of people found incredibly boring, or in worst cases, just plain offensive. So over time, I've realized that even on this core community channel, the ratio has gotten a lot worse than 7-to-1, and I found myself just feeling more discouraged than anything after reading comments even here. But the thing is, committing to not reading comments, for me at least, comes at a significant cost, because I love being plugged in with the video game reseller community and even, the less toxic parts of the collecting community. I'm just so deeply aware that a lot of the people who watch this channel have been watching for some of them years. Like you guys watching right now are the reason that both channels have been successful over the years, and I hate losing contact with that support base. But ultimately, I have come to recognize the wisdom of exposing myself in whatever way I can to less negativity in general. And I've just got to take my own advice about being selective about the kinds of feedback that I let into my brain. And the other thing that's really sad is, I know, especially on a video like this, right, that's a little bit longer, it's a little more personal, kind of more vulnerable, talking about some tough topics, I know there are going to be so many delightful people in the comments who are just going out of their way to say nice things, because so many of you guys are just like that, and that's something that I'm gonna miss so much. Just like seeing the people who go out of their way to do a little act of kindness of like leaving a nice comment on a video. I'm gonna miss that a lot. You know what? I'm gonna make this video the last video that I do read the comments because I do kind of want to see people's responses. But going forward, I'm not cutting myself off completely. I'm trying to be just a little bit more strategic. So you can still absolutely reach me. I read every single one of my DMs on Instagram. I read all of my emails as well. And I also talk to tons of people at the conventions that I go to, where I get to look in the eyes of people who have enjoyed one or both of the channels. So if you do want to reach me and say something positive or some constructive criticism even, you can still absolutely do so in those methods. But please don't take it personally if I don't respond to your comment after this video. The last two things I want to say are, I hope this hasn't been too depressing. To all my long-term supporters, I do want to say clearly, I am okay. This probably felt like a sadder video because it's a heavier topic, but I'm personally doing really great. And the last thing I'll say is something that I pretty much never ask, which is that if you know someone who is trying to grow on YouTube and social media and you found this helpful and wouldn't mind sending this to them, I just love the idea of other creators being able to watch this video and, if nothing else, at least feel a little bit less alone.